All right, excellent. Thanks everybody for joining us. Top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. As I mentioned before, I am not in my usual location, so my internet may be a little bit flaky. If it happens to go out, I'll let Missy and Ed hop in, but I'll go ahead and get us started here. So welcome into our NGSS ESS Working Group webinar for October. Today's webinar, entitled Teaching Earth Science with Interactive Maps, is one that has been requested by many of those in our community, and we're really happy to be able to bring the ESRI team to you, the ESRI team to you today. So just in case you've been out of it for the last year and a half, the Zoom instructions are at the bottom of the screen. If you need help with those, please drop a note in the chat box, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen. Missy, next slide, please. One more. So as I mentioned, this webinar series is brought to you by the NGSS ESS Working Group, and the primary core team of that is Ed Roback from AGI, Missy Holzer representing Nesta, and myself, Aida Awad, representing NAGT. We're joined by Bradley Cotton at CERC, who is working the gears behind the scenes for us. Thanks for joining us today, Bradley. Next slide, please, Missy. All right, today we will have three presenters. We'll have Dr. Tom Baker, who is the Education Manager at ESRI. We'll have Dr. Joseph Kerski, who is the Education Manager at ESRI, and Charlie Fitzpatrick, who is the K-12 Education Manager there. We'll save some time for Q&A at the end, but please, as we go through the course of the webinar, that chat box is a great place to have a discussion. So don't think of it as just questions, but think of it as a place to pop some ideas or thoughts that come into your head as we're going through the webinar in, and we can have that back channel discussion right there in the chat box. But do also drop questions there. We'll be mining that for questions that we'll hold towards the end of today's session. And at the end, we'll share again the link with you to the post-webinar survey. Next slide, please, Missy. Thank you very much. Our next webinar is going to be, I think, of great interest to our community. It will be held on November 18th, and that will be, recapping this Taking Stock of Science Standards Implementation Summit that was held this past week and will continue on in December at the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. So we'll be providing more information on that upcoming, and do watch your inbox for registration information in the next week or so. Also, we have a needs assessment. If somebody could drop the link to that needs assessment in the chat box, I'd appreciate that. We also have all of our webinars archived on the AGI YouTube channel as a playlist, so you can visit YouTube and then American Geosciences Institute and find our playlist there. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. We're going to turn it over to Tom now at this point, who will be getting us started with today's webinar, Teaching Earth Science with Interactive Maps. All right, Tom, take it away.
Thanks, Ada, and thanks, Missy. I'm going to go ahead and try to share a screen. Is that sharing okay for everybody?
Looks good.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting us. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all. My colleagues, Joseph and Charlie, will be each speaking after me, and each on increasingly sort of complex issues, if you will, around teaching Earth Science with interactive maps. So my job is really to help facilitate the kickoff, provide some sort of ground rules, if you will, and show you some of our introductory content along the way. ESRI, as maybe some of you know, is a GIS company. We're a software vendor, if you will. Started in 1969 really as a professional services company, and today we create a software called ArcGIS, which the company and the software are sort of the 800-pound gorillas in the GIS market. Over 350,000 organizations globally use our software in a variety of ways to answer questions and solve problems around really anything that has a geographic or locational component to it. So what I'd like to do today, of course, is give you an overview of some starting points, and then I'll hand it off to Joseph. One thing I do want to mention up front is that we did an analysis last summer of the use of geospatial language in K-12 science standards. If you're so inclined, you're welcome to check out the site. It is state specific, so the analysis can be fairly honed to your needs. We won't go much more into standards than that during the next 45 minutes or so. So Arcgis Online is the core product that is used in K-12. It is a core interactive mapping tool that we see used not only in the US, but globally. You can find it at arcgis.com. And the truth of the matter is you can do a whole lot without being logged into the system, without actually having an account. We're going to demonstrate a lot of that today. Both Joseph and I will be doing that. There's, of course, a lot more you can do with a login, and those really start to enter into things like creating analysis and building your own applications, building your own data. Those kinds of things come with logins. The good news is that for K-12 classroom instruction, everything we're going to cover today, all the software, all the resources, even access to the data, are available to you at no cost. So don't let that hold you back from being creative about directions you might want to go with these tools. So for those of you who are sort of brand new to GIS or digital maps, you can think of it as a layer of data. It's a series of layers of data. And sometimes we use a metaphor of say a pizza, pepperoni pizza, where you can look down onto it and you see a variety of toppings where each topping is in its own layer. Maybe you have a cheese layer, a pepperoni layer, a sauce layer. The same thing applies in a GIS where you have points, lines, and areas or volumes or images that help make up that sort of digital map or pizza, if you will. That provides us a starting point for understanding how or what data analysis possibilities might look like. So we take all this and we put it into a digital system, right? And this really today, with the use of online platforms like Arcgis Online and all of these organizations generating data and generating analysis, satellites, drones, and everybody out running around with cell phones and GPS units, there is a ton of data that is location based, or data that has a locational attribute. Typically, we think of that as latitude, longitude, but it certainly doesn't have to be limited to lat long. So what we're talking about here in terms of scale is planetary, and it might be Earth or it might be another planet, as I think maybe Joseph will talk a bit about, or it can be, the backyard. Do you want to map the dandelions or map, fossils in your school ground, if you're that lucky? The scale of these things are highly flexible, highly adaptable to your needs. Okay. And let's see if there we go. So a very brief let's kill this chat. I don't think it's showing up in Zoom, but a very brief technical overview of what we're talking about today. We're talking about a platform called Arcgis Online. The bubble above it represents the map viewer. This is kind of our core tool for creating maps and also sharing them with students. In fact, I'm going to show you something next called Geo Inquiries that is based entirely on representing data inside of this map viewer. And it's a JavaScript viewer that loads up in any web browser, which means it'll go on your computer, go on a mobile phone, go on a tablet. In addition to the map viewer, we have some other tools that are really commonly used in K-12. One of those is Survey123. You'll experience one of those in a few moments, but as you might guess, it is a survey tool, and it affords map-based or location-based data collection, and it's got some other cool widgets we'll take a look at. The third item to be aware of is a dashboard. It's a nice compact tool for visualizing or even analyzing data. We won't spend a lot of time with dashboards, I don't think, today, but it is important to be aware of them because they are very popular and very powerful. And then, of course, story maps, which is that capacity to wrap up the data that's been collected, the analysis that's been done, and put it into a rich, compelling story with narrative, with video, photography, as well as your maps, into a single cohesive story. So these are the tools that we will be ultimately at least making you aware of. So the first thing I want to share with you in terms of our content is something called geo inquiries. These are designed as starter activities. If you have not used GIS in your classroom, or there are, say, for example, technical or time or other limitations to really doing a deep dive into GIS, geo inquiries can be a great starting point. These are 15-minute activities. We actually have geo inquiry collections for 10 different subject areas. Earth science is one of those, of course. And in these cases, these collections have 15 to 20 activities. They are short 15-minute activities. And of course, they're tied to the next gen science standards. We use a 5E instructional model for our earth science content. We tie them to textbooks. You can see the listing, but they have been time tested. In fact, the earth science collection was our first collection off the ground. So these activities and data have really been thoroughly vetted by teachers and students over the years. So this is an example of one activity inside the earth science collection. This is a 2-page PDF that I've just screenshotted. You'll notice it's pretty straightforward. Title, learning objectives, standards. That blue bar, let's see if my mouse will cooperate. That blue bar with the URL in it is the map that goes along with the topic. And of course, you probably recognize this, cracked plates. This concept is very, very common in earth science. This is how these activities are designed and structured to meet content needs of the sort of the tried and true teacher out there. Okay, so geo inquiries are about teaching content first and foremost. So we provide the map URL, and then we provide a series of structured questions that you can use or not use. But we try to provide a question arc for you, such that you can interrogate, your students can interrogate those maps and the data, and really, draw out the marrow from them and make the experience engaging and meaningful. Of course, these data come from sources like USGS, NOAA, ESRI, some of our own map organizations that we collaborate with, National Geographic. So these are some of the premier organizations producing data and maps, and we bring it all together for you in a nice synthesized package where the data is already there, the map viewer is there, and the activities in front of you here. So as you go down through the rest of the activity, you go to page 2, you're finishing up the inquiry. There's a couple technical tool tips in the boxes, and then beneath that, you can see some textbook linkages and some next steps. The only other thing that's really worth pointing out is that these activities are licensed under Creative Commons, so you can easily modify these as you like and really redeploy them if you want. A lot of teachers, in fact, will, I forgot I had these arrows. A lot of teachers, in fact, will modify these activities and then put them up inside of their local districts, LMS systems, for example. The map URL, the teacher can load up on screen. Alternatively, you can also have the students load the map URL up on their screens, on their computers. That's, of course, particularly effective if you're teaching through Zoom, or you just want the kids to have hands-on experience with these maps. So there's a couple of examples of the maps from this one activity. Again, with the GIS, your table of contents along the left side identifies the layers in your map, which you can turn on and off and change the cartography, do a variety of analyses if you're logged in, so on and so forth. So yeah, and this goes really back to that flexibility. We offer student worksheets along with each one of these activities. The student worksheets are in a Google Doc format, so you can save them down to really any format you want from there. But if you want to offer a geo inquiry as a homework assignment or just as a worksheet-based assignment, that's also an option for you. So again, particularly during COVID, we were trying to make the learning materials as flexible as possible for your needs and interests. Earth science is in a special place. It's along with just a handful of other activities. We actually offer what we call a level 2 activity. Level 2 allows people to log in, students or teachers to log in, and then do an analysis on one or more of the data layers in the map itself. There's a couple key differences between the level 2 activities. You do need to have a login, which means you need to have an Arcgis Online organizational account, which Charlie will talk about in a bit. But with the activities themselves, you'll see there's a large number 2 here in the header. You'll also notice that up in the top, it talks a little bit about the credit consumption. When you do things in Arcgis Online in terms of analysis, sometimes they consume small amounts of credit, not a big deal, but it is something we want to make you aware of as you use it. And then in the activity itself, there's some call out areas where the analysis steps are have some special icons that help identify them. So again, in these activities, students will have to have an account, or the teacher would, and students will actually be generating an analysis layer as a result of this activity. Okay. One thing before I leave you today is I wanted to make you aware of something called the mapping hour, and hopefully my colleagues didn't plan on touching on this, but mapping hour is a series of 20 one-hour videos that goes through a range of topics. It covers in depth those 4 fundamental technologies that I showed you earlier: the map viewer, the dashboard, the Survey123, and the story maps, along with a few other related technologies. So you can find the mapping hour URLs there at the bottom of the column. It's free content. It's appropriate for teachers and parents as well. And a lot of older students have also engaged in it, but is an additional resource, and it's there for you. So as we begin to prepare to hand off to Joseph, I want to invite you, request of you to open up a browser window on your computer or your phone. Computer might be a little easier if you're like me. The text is a little bit bigger, but we have a survey here for you. If you have a phone and want to use a phone, you can probably shoot that QR code, and the survey is going to pop up for you. And this is a survey specifically for Earth Science teachers, and it's kind of a get to know you activity. It shouldn't take but a few minutes, and we'll give you a few more seconds to grab the URL or QR code. And as you're filling out that form, Joseph and I will transition over. So again, Survey123 is that tool in our toolbox that allows students or teachers to collect data. And today we're kind of using it in a fun way. Almost, no one say silly, but you could very easily take this tool and use it in the field. If you want to get kids outside and collecting data, this is a tool that is very, very powerful. And that data flows straight into Arcgis Online for easy mapping and analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my screen share. So last chance to grab that URL. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Kerski.
Well, thank you, Dr. Baker. Greetings all. Joseph Kerski here. I'm really glad to be with you all. So honored to have such a great crowd for this. And my task, which is a tall order, is to do a little bit of a deeper dive with you, not too deep, a little bit of a part of the crust, not into the mantle. Little bit of a deeper dive with you on some of these tools that I think Tom provided a great overview about what this is and why it actually matters. I'm going to dig into that a little bit more. My colleague Charlie that will follow me, he always talks about GIS as a thinker's tool. Geospatial technology has always been about solving problems and doing inquiry. So hence, that's why we think it's so perfect for earth science instruction. So exploring the spheres in a holistic sense, the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, the anthrosphere, etc. That is what geospatial technology allows us all to do as educators and allows your students to do. Also, I think worthy of note is that people will actually be doing this in the workplace. Your students will be touching geotechnologies in the workplace, no matter what field they go into, because everybody is asking the whys of where, from health to transportation to a wide variety of issues. So they will use this in the future. And so it empowers their science professionals, but also empowers your students right here and now. This is my contact information, but we'll share all of this at the end about how to get a hold of us for the future. I used to work at the USGS, and I'm hailing from Colorado right now. So some nice landforms behind me that we'll actually explore in GIS here in a bit. But I hope you're getting a sense that my colleagues and I, we truly believe, folks, that geotechnologies are not just a worthy tool to use in instruction, but they are essential for resiliency, sustainability, a healthier, happier planet in the future. They are critical tools for our future. Tom touched on this: modern geospatial technology, web-based. You've got field tools, you've got tools to communicate with dashboards and story maps and infographics. You've got analytical tools. So it's sort of one of those tools that you can collect data, map it, analyze it, communicate about it, ask additional questions. Well, what if we added this variable? What if we changed the location? So it's a problem-solving kind of environment. And here are just a few reasons. I'm going to share this is a story map that I'm sharing right now. And I'll share this in the ends. You don't have to be writing any of this down. Just sort of hopefully get some inspiration and some ideas for your future instruction. A couple reasons why we believe this is so important. Tom really covered this well, but fostering inquiry, community connections, using updated real-time issues in our planet, wildfires, stream gauges, natural hazards, and so much more, blazing career pathways, and other things we could talk about. But I also wanted to mention that we believe that you're not just fostering how to geocode, how to create a riparian zone around a stream, that sort of thing. You're fostering content knowledge about plate tectonics or landforms or climatology, et cetera. So, and you're also fostering additional skills besides the geotechnology skills, how to communicate, how to use data fluency, all of that sort of thing. And through it all, it's the geographic or spatial perspective that we find is so valuable and so engaging. Maps have been engaging for a long time, for centuries, right? And there, I've got some links in the job landscape, but one of the things to note is organizations need your students that are comfortable with engaging with a wide variety and types and scales of data. And I know that's what drew pretty much all of us probably on the webinar today into teaching, right? We love digging into data. We want students to be engaged in real issues, and that's what these tools allow us to do. But keep in mind, though, I took this in an actual high school here in Colorado. The technology's changed and will change. The things that you hold near and dear technologically wise, close to you, there'll be a doorstop or at least a paperweight someday. So embrace that change. The most important tool is this tool, right? Your brain and your spatially thinking brain and the brains of your students, encouraging lifelong learning. So a couple of topics that I'll delve into in these remaining 10 minutes that I've got with you all are some of the ones that you see here, and themes that transcend all of these things that Tom and Charlie and I will all talk about: change over space and time, human interaction, space and place, patterns, relationships, trends, etc. And there are two approaches. The way I see this, you're using existing maps and layers. Tom talked about that whole layering idea of GIS. So you can consume existing maps that NOAA, NASA, USGS, other organizations have created, and you can build your own as an instructor. And students, as Tom touched on in the last segment, can build their own. So here are 10 selected ways to teach. I don't think I'll cover all 10, but you'll have this as a resource to dig into after the webinar today. 10 ways to teach Earth science with these web GIS datasets and tools. First of all, there are certain web mapping applications. This is a story map. We'll talk more about story maps. But one of them is this indicators of the planet. Again, this will all be linked in this story map, so you don't have to be writing all this down. If I were teaching Earth science right now, I would have the students go to this indicators page, which is part of our Living Atlas of the World, a compendium, a library of interactive maps and layers that are curated and vetted. Doesn't mean they're perfect, but from reputable authoritative agencies. And I would have the students go to this every Monday, let's say, every Monday morning in my class, and okay, pick, or I pick, either way you want to do it, a topic of interest. And under each one of these cells is an interactive, as you would expect, web map with the current wildfires layer and the population. Let's look at the relationship between wildfires, population density, and let's say ecoregions. Why is so much of the chaparral in fire right now? And what's the nearest fire to me? So you've got interactive tools under each one of these. It's sort of a dashboard, if you will, for the key indicators of the planet, which is why we call this the indicators page. So that's one resource that I wanted to share. The planetary water balance. Water is pretty critical, right? Part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and also central to our earth science teaching. And the Water Balance app is another one of those living atlas of the world apps. And I've got, with the Water Balance app, I've got an interactive map of the world. I've got 6 variables. I'm gonna pick precipitation. I'm gonna click on the Amazon. Let's zoom in a little bit. And the interesting thing, and I think the worthy thing, one of the worthy things about modern GIS is that you've got this capability where it's tied to the Internet of Things. So you've got near real-time and real-time feeds coming from the sensor network. Okay, so in this case, I'm clicking in the Amazon and I can see right away that it's not summer and winter, it's the wet season and the dry season. So I would ask the students, hey, when is the wet season? Oh, it looks like, April, May, and the dry season right around now, October, November. And if I click in southern Libya, I'm going to see whole months of the year with absolutely no precipitation at all. So isn't it fascinating that we've got this tool at your fingertips where you can explore not only those things, but for example, hey, let's look at Southeast Texas. We're going to see some spikes in Southeast Texas. And those spikes are, as you probably would expect, coinciding with major hurricanes rolling through there. So you've got near real-time data. You can export that Excel spreadsheet for further analysis. So that's the Planetary Water Balance, one of my favorite tools. Another one of my favorite tools is this Wayback Imagery app. The Wayback Imagery app, and I'm going to close a few tabs just for sanity, is you've got a swiping capability. You've probably seen in other web maps over the last couple years because they become quite powerful and quite common. But here I'm looking at, I want 2014 on the left side. You've got a global set of imagery at your fingertips. And on the right side, I'm going to look at 2021. So here, obviously, I'm looking at major amounts of urban sprawl, suburban Las Vegas. If I zoom out and pan over to Lake Mead, I'm going to see, oh, in 2014, this is what I want the students to do, right? I want them to say, oh, it looks like the water level was a lot higher 7 years ago. What's where, why is it there, and why should we care? Why should we care if the lake level drops in a reservoir like this, feeding and caring for a large community out in the middle of the desert? It's a critical issue, not only for Las Vegas, for hundreds of other communities around the world, right? So with this tool, you can analyze coastal erosion, glacial retreat, expansion of agriculture in Saudi Arabia or in the Midwest USA, urban sprawl, lake levels, et cetera. So you're really getting into the, again, what's where, why is it there, and why should we care? Just this one app. And touching on what Tom was saying earlier, this also allows you to have a level 1 experience and a level 2. A level 1 is no login required. I'm just in a browser, as you can see, and I've got some powerful capabilities at my fingertips. But level 2 is if I sign into ArcGIS Online, I can actually take these layers that I've saved into ArcGIS Online for further analysis. I could add ecoregions, I could add population density, I could add the hydro network, et cetera. So you've got more power there. But that's the Wayback Imagery. We could spend the whole hour on just these 3 tools alone. But moving on, there's another one on Landsat Lens, where you can look at different bands in the Landsat image for going back to the 1970s. And even further back with the USGS Topo Map Explorer, where you're going to have a transparency kind of experience where you've got basically 100 years of historical USGS topographic maps looking at changes over time. Since it's USGS, in that case, it's just USA. But still, you've got a lot of power at your fingertips. How many of you have a big collection of USGS topos in your classroom? Well, you've got all of those and the historical editions in this one tool. So pretty exciting times. All right. One of the other tools that I wanted to share with you is this profile tool. Again, running in ArcGIS Online. I've zoomed in actually on the landscape behind me, Western Colorado, and I've drawn a line between the Grand Valley and the Grand Mesa, which is a cap rock, old lava flow. And I can see the flatness of the Grand Mesa, hence its name, around 10,000 feet high, 3,200-ish meters high. If I zoom in, you can analyze in the same way a profile for your landform around your school or anywhere around the world, the Himalayas, etc. So here I've got this beautiful cuesta behind me, as you can see here, the Book Cliffs and the Grand Valley. Ah, that's so great. I love that tool. So this is just another web mapping application that we find is very powerful. Along those lines, Tom hinted at this, going deeper, going farther, even beyond the Earth. So because these tools are all tied to a platform, GIS, modern GIS is a platform that people can build on. And one of the things that you can do is you can build these web mapping applications. So a couple of our colleagues built this Mars Explorer using ArcGIS as the platform to do it. So with the Mars Explorer, you can do things like, where did the Perseverance lander land back in February? Why did it land there? And let's do things like, how big is this crater? So we can measure, we've got measure tools that we can use. For example, here, how wide is this crater? We can also do things like compare. Oh, I'm going to compare a region. Okay, let's say we want to compare, how about you folks are, let's say Iowa. What's not to love about Iowa? Let's say we compare Iowa to Olympus Mons or to the Perseverance crater. That's the kind of thing you can do with this. It's really fascinating to be able to do this in this Mars Explorer. For example, Olympus Mons is as big as Iowa. And you can say that to the students, right? But if they're actually doing it, that's what we love about GIS. The students are actually doing some of these investigations, and they're telling you, Olympus Mons is the same size as Iowa. Oh my gosh, that's huge. So plopping Mount Everest on Valles Marineris and a lot of other things that we could do that I don't have time to actually explore with you. But I know that you folks will dig into this and really love this tool. Here's a screenshot of the Grand Canyon on Valles Marineris. Okay, I better move on. One of the other things that probably many of you have used for years is, remember those 100 landforms, those books that Hammond Scientific and others published over the years? I used to take around a big set of USGS topo maps to teach these. But now you can actually, and as I did here, put the Ennis, Montana alluvial fan into a 3D scene. There's 3D capabilities in this ArcGIS platform, so you can actually explore those things. The Tombolo off of Massachusetts, the esker, the famous esker that was in that book in Minnesota, moraines, lava fields, and so much more. So you've got this capability of exploring and teaching geomorphology effectively with these 2D maps and 3D scenes. Very powerful to be able to do that. All right, another thing that I wanted to do with you all is, let's keep digging deeper. How are you going to get the data? We don't have time in this webinar to dig into that, but there's the Living Atlas of the World is one good source for data, and I'll just leave it at that for now. But there's no shortage, as Tom also hinted at, from NOAA, NASA, USGS, and other state agencies, local governments in terms of spatial data. There's also ways for you to teach weather and climate as part of your earth science curriculum. Tom alluded to the last 30 days of earthquakes. There's tornado tracks. There's no shortage of hazards data as well in this platform. You've got 70 years of tornado tracks. You've got hundreds of years of hurricanes. You have thousands of years of historical earthquake records, all mapped. Should you accept every web map? No, there are other resources that we can share about. How do you know if you can trust that map, where the data sources came from, and so on? So that's good discussion to have with the students as well. All right, closing out here because I've effectively run out of, I've got 1 minute left, it looks like. I'm going to skip to the ecological marine units. This is a tool, many of these tools were years in the making, very rigorous methods that went into this. And indeed, I think Charlie's going to show you a couple of sites that anchor GIS in science. It's very firmly anchored in sound science methods. But the ecological marine units is one of those examples. I've got the capability with a 10-kilometer mesh anywhere around the world to look at different variables, as you can see here. Oh, this is this location off of California. I want to look at the temperature, the dissolved solids, the salinity, etc. Even those of you that are teaching grade 5, why is the Atlantic coast warmer than the Pacific coast off of the coast, the 48 states of the USA, etc. So being able to do that, in other words, the ocean is not just this vast expanse of nothingness, and that's all the same, right? You can actually analyze some of the water chemistry, which is fascinating to do with these mapping tools. All right, last tool I'm going to show you here, and that is going to be tied into what Tom was indicating earlier, and that is we've got field tools. So for example, you all just participated in the Getting to Know Earth Science Teachers Survey123 tool that allowed you to go out to a survey, which is much like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms. You can create one of these tools, one of these surveys rather easily using Survey123, and we've got tutorials on how to do that, and you responded here. And the instantaneous results then is we've got results from all of you participating in that survey with tools that are tied to the survey. So here we've got a word cloud, we've got some responses coming in, what interest you have in teaching, some of your answers, etc. But of course, and some of the images that you all have shared. Here's mine of the Bandera crater in New Mexico and some of yours as well. But then we've also got this. We've got a live interactive web map. And the way that Charlie symbolized this map is he's got two different variables in it: your favorite discipline and the years teaching earth science. So you've got a bivariate map. The size of the circle is the number of years teaching earth science, and the favorite discipline in the colors. But you can see here, think about this outside the box. Tom hinted at this a little bit. You can deploy a survey on invasive species, water quality, weather, and I've got one on walkable neighborhoods, for example. What is walkable, what's not? Here's my walkability survey that has come back from people all over the world participating in that survey. It could just as easily been invasive species or litter or anything else. And then I've got a dashboard, just like the ones you've seen at JHU, the COVID dashboard. You've got access to the same tools that they used for that COVID dashboard. So I hope that is of interest, and I hope that piques some discussion. And here's a little earth science quiz. Where is this? As I transition to Charlie, you can think about where that might be. All right, thanks folks for having us. Turning it over to Charlie now.
Oh, thanks, Joseph. And I could just listen to Joseph and Tom sharing some of their earth science wisdom and wizardry for hours and hours. And Joseph, everybody wants your presentation. So make sure that you, get that in place here. Hang on, let me go back. Come on, mouse. Come on, you can go back. You can go back. You can go, come on. It can't go back. So let me just escape for a second and say, okay, I'm gonna go back by hand. All right, now we're gonna go. All right, so I'm gonna talk about, people were asking questions about software and gee, how do we get access to this? In the K-12 side of life, everything is great. It's easy because in the K-12 environment, we have software licenses for schools or districts or youth clubs, free for instructional use. And we provide safe and secure logins for all. People asked about two-year colleges and larger, and two-year colleges and larger pay a highly reduced fee for accessing the same tools. So we want people to use these things. We are so interested in getting schools to do it that around the world, these tools are available for free. So here you're looking at a variety of the tools that are available. You had Survey123, you saw a couple of story maps, you saw some map viewers with a geo inquiries, all inside of this Arcgis Online organization, where everybody can have their own safe and secure login. Now, Do you absolutely need to have a login to do some of this fun stuff? As Tom and Joseph both indicated, no, you don't absolutely need to have a login in order to do GIS. There's all kinds of stuff. I wrote a blog recently that was updating an earlier blog about learning without a login. But if you want to create stuff and save it and share it that are taking advantage of the powers of this organization or powers of Arcgis Online, you need to have a login in the organization to do that. How can anybody request one of these? Who can request an ArcGIS school bundle? It needs to be a school or district employee. You can't, as a parent, say, I want to do this for my kid's school. I don't work there, but I want to do it for my kid's school. You can't do it for your kid's school. You can do it for the school that you work at and get somebody else to do it for the school that your kids go to, or a district. We have sites that are using this district-wide. The ideal is teachers working with the district tech people so that they can set up a single sign-on. That way everybody has access to it. It can be as simple as a single teacher who is willing to manage the license. Just go to esri.com/schools. You'll see a pull down for schools mapping software bundle. You'll see a form like this, and it comes to me and colleagues, and we set it up. So how do we manage this? There is guidance that exists that is particularly for schools and clubs, because this is professional software that you're using. Everything that you've seen is professional software that we're organizing for use in schools, but it's available. It's the same tools that they're using in the organizations that Joseph and Tom were mentioning about. And this document here, the esriurl.com/AGO orgs for schools, is a Bible that walks you through how do I navigate and push this thing together? How do I build it? And so the whole idea is everybody can have access to this. You can see over 6,000 sites already on the map that have access to this. We make it available for free. We want people to use it free for K-12 schools and districts. We want people to use it at all levels of life. And so esri.com/schools will take you to where there's a lot of information out there. So Joseph, I hope that you've had a chance to put your story map link into the chat, and maybe we can ask Missy and Ada and Ed and Bradley about if there have been some questions that people want to ask. And in the meantime, I'm going to see if I can escape and show you. Yep, here's the esri.com/schools site. And if you just go to the schools mapping software bundle, away you go.
Well, thanks, Charlie, Tom, and Joe. This is Ed Robeck from AGI. Thank you very much for those presentations. We do have some questions for you. And I'm going to start with a couple that have been in the chat. There was a question about that came from Sylvie. It says, I teach aerospace to 12 to 20-year-old Civil Air Patrol cadets. CAP is a nonprofit. Will that count as K-12?
We do have a nonprofit program, and sometimes, depending on the nature, there are a number of organizations where there's line blurring that happens. And so we deal with programs like this all the time. We work with people to try to figure out what's the appropriate software licensing. The K-12 has a very tight, because we give it away to people and we give you all of the tools and credits and things like that that you need. It has a very tight constraint around it, which is it can't go beyond teaching students, K-12 students, teaching K-12 teachers, or creating material for their exclusive use. But we do have lightning low price software available for higher ed and nonprofits. Go to town.
Thanks, Charlie. And this is directed to Tom, but you kind of gestured toward it here about what is meant by credits. Can maybe Tom, because Tom spoke about that, but any of you, I'm sure, could explain that.
Go for it, Tom.
Yeah, so Arcgis Online, when your, say, school or district creates an organization, you're allotted a certain number of credits. When you do certain things in Arcgis Online, like an analysis, for example, it will eat a little credit. It costs a little credit for the operation. Typically speaking, unless a school or district is running a GIS class or GIS focused class, they never come anywhere near consuming the credits that are initially allotted to the organization. In the case where somebody uses GIS a lot, maybe even has a GIS class, they can chew through enough credits that occasionally we issue more credits. When those credits are consumed for instructional purposes, just as we've talked about here today, we just simply refill the bucket and away you go. So by and large, it's a non-issue. It's just something to be aware of in the background.
Okay, great, thanks. There's a couple of questions. I think Charlie got this one about two-year colleges. There were a couple of questions about that. Charlie, you said in your response that 2ICs count as higher ed. That I see you nodding. Yeah, okay. One of the questions that we saw has to do with the platform that these run on. A lot of schools using Chromebooks. Do these run on Chromebooks?
Yes, they do. They work well on Chromebooks. I've got my Chromebook that I test everything on, and was doing something elaborate in 3D the other day to get a screenshot for people. So, yep, it works great on Chromebooks.
Okay. And
actually,
also,
if I can add one more element there, the key is not the device. The key is actually the bandwidth. Because if you're on a dribble net, that's going to be tough even on the biggest, strongest, meanest machine. But if you've got high-end connectivity and you're on a base level Chromebook, you're going to be smoking.
okay, great. And is there any, there are some platforms that track student, where they go, how much time they spend, so teachers can sort of get a sense of what they're having trouble with or what they're really engaging with. Is there any of that sort of user tracking that is available to teachers on these, the ESRI resources?
I'm going to let Tom jump in and respond to that one. Tom?
Probably not the way you're thinking of a traditional tracking system. Keep in mind that, Arcgis Online is not, strictly speaking, a learning management system. We don't generate, for example, STORM objects that a lot of instructional designers might use in large settings. So the way you can track user activity, of course, is by saving maps, looking at records submitted to surveys, for example. That ability to see, to kind of introspect into what's going on in a student's account is entirely doable and quite normal in settings, but there is no, for example, tracking cookie that will allow you to see how many pages a kid clicked on, during last hour's class.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. Is it necessary for each student to make their own account on their own computer to use these tools?
The students don't make their account. This is one of the things that we try to encourage people to pay close attention to the guidance. We want to work with adults. We don't want students' personally identifiable information in the system. We try to do everything that we can to help people keep their kids safe and comfortable and happy. And so the students don't create their logins. The teachers can create it. And that's where single sign-on makes life so much easier.
Great, thanks for that. Susan Fields asked, and Susan, feel free to unmute, and if I don't get this right, asked, will these platforms communicate with a Canvas learning management system? I'm not sure the nature of that.
Yeah,
question.
this is Joseph. I responded to that, and I've been around so long. I've used most of the major platforms: Blackboard, D2L, Brightspace, Canvas, PopuliWeb, Moodle. This works really well with those. You can even embed, like I did with my story map. Noticed how a couple of those maps were like interactive inside the story map, and even the 3D scenes with the Ennis alluvial fan, etc. So you can even embed. This may be TMI, but I'd go a little light on the embeds just for the reasons Charlie talked about. When you're in your LMS, you don't want to have every single thing embedded because it might slow it down. So, you know, a mix of embeds and links to separate tabs. But yes, works very well with all of those LMSs.
Excellent, thank you.
I'm going to interrupt just for a second here because I have a little bit of a follow on. Joseph, since you're talking about that, is there the ability to pull things into story maps, things like the way back layers and the other bits that you showed? Those are all interactive, right? That you can pull right into your story maps and other tools.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thanks.
So we have a question. Actually, it's not the first time it's come up. What about informal education organizations that cater to a K-12 level, nature centers, museums, public libraries, and such?
In the realm of creating content, creating programs that are exclusively for K-12 students, that works great. We have a lot of people who say, great, we're going to do this school program, and then we're going to share that program out with the whole community. That doesn't work so well for us. So the key is it needs to be just exclusively for K-12 setting, then that works with the K-12 license. We love people to get at all ages to be learning with this stuff. We just need to make sure it's using the correct licensing scheme.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. One of the questions that came up was, you talked a lot about data analysis, and I'm not sure who this one's to really, but sort of in the context of classroom assignments, classroom investigations, do you ever see students doing original research, high school students doing research using these tools? And is there a community of these kinds of students that somebody could connect with if they wanted to?
Actually, I was going to say Joseph should take this, but then I saw Tom should take it. No, I'm going to take it. I'm actually going to share my screen, because what I want to do is to show you that we have actually a competition. This is such a big deal for people that we want people to practice this and get really good at it. School comp. ESRIRoll.com/AG. Sorry, I didn't type it just quite right there. Come on, Charlie. It's a competition that we have for grades 4 through 8 for middle school, and then 9 through 12 for high school. And what you'll see within it is students putting together fabulous research projects, and you can see the results in here. And we had 645 participate this last year. An 11th grader in New York City, one with a very social analysis project. A 6th grader won the grade 4 through 8 project looking at poverty and food in St. Louis. Honorable mention at high school was an analysis of seagrass in a particular bay. And then honorable mention at the middle school level was organic food. People can do all kinds of things, and you can click on these and look at their creations. So this is exactly what we want people to engage in all across the board.
And thanks for that. That's terrific. I'm glad you took the time to go to the website. That's very impressive. Aida and Missy, please do feel free to jump in anytime if you're seeing questions that I'm missing or anything. But I wanted to ask real quick, is any of this, the map you just showed was all US? Is any of this happening internationally?
There are countries that are doing this, and it's not just the strongly economically developed countries. It's happening in other places. It's happening in Colombia, in Turkey, but I mean, there's the UK, Canada, France, the Netherlands, Australia, Japan, Korea. People are doing this all over the place.
Okay, terrific, terrific. We have about 5 minutes left. Aida, do we have any more time for questions? She's shaking her head.
I'm going to ask Missy to pop up those closing slides for us. Tom, Charlie, and Joseph, thank you so much for a really inspiring presentation today. We're all getting our fingers ready to go and cruise around and look at all this stuff. We'll all be up late tonight, so we'll be late for work tomorrow, but it's Friday, so it's okay. Do it tonight, stay up late. It's Thursday, I think, maybe. Thanks, Missy, for pulling those up. Just as a reminder, watch your inbox for an announcement about our November webinar, which will be the 18th of November at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, where we'll be really digging into that National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine Summit that took place last week. And day 3 of it will be December 8th. So you'll be able to kind of get a summary of that and be ready for December 8th as well. I'm going to go ahead to the next slide, please, Missy. That should be our post-webinar survey slide. Yep, if somebody could grab that, perhaps Bradley, you could grab that and drop it into the chat. We do invite you, and we do really appreciate very much when you complete the post-webinar survey. It helps us to understand how you're using what you're learning in the webinars and how we can offer a program that is really important for everyone that is viewing the webinars. And also, if you want a certificate of completion, that's the only way you can get that certificate. So please make sure that you're visiting that. And next slide, please. I would like to, on behalf of NAGT, invite you to join us and become friends with all of the NAGT members. So NAGT does have a full webinar series. As one of the member benefits, there are webinars at least one per week, as well as a number of publications and other member benefits. So please do visit us at nagt.org. Next slide. I think that is Missy. You want to speak about NESTA?
Yeah, so come join us, National Earth Science Teachers Association. You are a national association for K-12 Earth and Space Science educators. So you don't need to be a full-fledged Earth and Space Science educator. You can have it in your curricula someplace, or just be a friend and join us. We have quarterly journal, we've got a monthly e-news, and we have active professional development as well.
Thanks, Missy. Ed?
Thank you all very much for being here. Both of my colleagues are member societies of AGI, which is a federation of professional societies in the geosciences. I invite you to look at our website. There's lots of materials, Education Geosource, the Earth Science Week Online Toolkit, and others. We just had Earth Science Week, but remember, it's Earth Science Week all year long. So please pay attention to those things and sign up for newsletters and such so we can be in communication with you. Thank you all very much for being here.
All right. Thank you again to our presenters, Tom and Charlie and Joseph. We really appreciate you coming and sharing that with us. Lots of requests for you to come back and share different things. And so I'm sure that the community would love to have that happen. Again, on behalf of Ed and Missy, myself, and Bradley behind the scenes, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks all.